What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall market. I'm going to break down some big news that came out involving Elon Musk, what's going on with the whole situation between Iran, the US, and Israel, and also what's going on with all my price predictions for Tesla stock and beyond. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. Deposit $5,000 and you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. The offer ends at the end of July. You also qualify for an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening to Tesla. So, as you guys could tell, Tesla loves to reject near this 333 area, but at the same time, we like to get bought back up near 310. We've been going back and forth, back and forth and back and forth for the past week and a half. Now, on the daily time frame, you guys can see we're also going back and forth between supply and demand, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth like this. We're also stuck in the middle. On the weekly time frame, the same thing is essentially going on, kind of going back and forth here, but the weekly does have a little bit of weakness for Tesla stock because of this candlestick. So solely trading off candlesticks is not everything. What also matters is going to be the overall news. And I just want to say that Tesla is range bound right now, getting very tight. So I do expect a big expansion in volatility this coming week. Will Tesla break out higher? Will it get a rug pull with the overall market? We'll have to wait and see. I do want to give you guys a warning, though, because there is some big news that came out as the U.S. has gone directly involved in Iran, and this may cause a big spike in crude prices, which may drag the market lower. And as you guys know, when the whole market comes down, it could be affecting Tesla. We saw the epitome of that on Friday, right? Tesla was trying to push only to get a big rejection with the markets. So we're going to see if Tesla's affected by this news or not. Let's first talk about the news, and I'll break down more details about this chart. We're consolidating right now, but there's going to be a big move coming. So let's talk about this. The good news is that Tesla has their very, very awesome lineup of vehicles. We have the Robo taxi, and also we have their models that are going to be compatible with full self-driving technology to eventually become Robo taxis in the future, and also the Optimus robot. This is Elon Musk, who is back on his main quest. We're seeing this on his overall X page. On top of this, Musk mentioned that the Tesla Robotaxi launch is going to be beginning in Austin this afternoon, with customers paying a $4.20 flat fee. There's also a video of Mr. Musk going inside of one of these robotaxis. You guys can see that he is just directly involved. Looks very excited as he's once again inside of it. He's going to be taking it for a spin. Very, very cool stuff, in my opinion. And this is very bullish for the long term as Tesla begins to expand the scope of these, right? Because Elon Musk is saying that by the end of next year, we will have hundreds of thousands, if not over a million Teslas doing self-driving in the USA. That's big, big, big news that came out from Elon Musk. He is saying that there's going to be millions of them. So Tesla's not just launching a dozen of these robo taxis, even if today that's all they have to start things off. They're starting off by just sticking a toe in the water, slowly, slowly, slowly testing it out. Then eventually, they're going to be expanding everything, and we're going to be looking for hundreds, thousands, and eventually millions as years progress. So that's the main goal for Tesla. Yes, it's going to be in a very, very smaller environment with geofencing and such. I completely understand why they're doing that when you understand the parameters and what's going on. However, for the long term, this is just the start, and still very, very bullish nonetheless for the long term. Also, there's people saying that the Model Y robotaxis are everywhere in Austin, Texas. You guys can see there's videos of them. There's actually one right over here that's driving. You guys can see there's no driver right there. It's actually on its own. So very, very cool stuff as we're seeing them being tested. Very, very awesome. So what's the reaction for Tesla going to be based off this? And honestly, guys, I can't make promises because a lot of the time you have a saying that goes by the rumors sold the news. Sometimes after big events, Tesla does get sell-offs. So you do want to be very, very careful until we see which way we end up breaking. If Tesla fails here, if we lose the support right here, this blue trend line, and we end up losing 310, I am expecting a bigger move down to the low 300s. But if Tesla manages to break above 328, we could be retesting 333 all over again. If we break that, we're going to be more bullish. For now, it is in the middle based off the robotaxi news in itself. That's kind of like neutral for us. It could go either way. But what makes me apprehensive is this news right here that just came out. And this could drag the market down. Actually, right now, we're seeing Bitcoin selling off. So we're going to see how this ends up affecting futures very soon, and also Tesla stock. So what is this news? President Trump has just addressed the nation about something super, super big. He just announced that we have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran. He named them, and then he mentioned that the Air Force is also going to be involved, and the list goes on. It's very crazy, guys, the whole situation. As you guys know, there's a very, very long history between the tensions in the Middle East between Israel, Iran, and many other countries that are involved, either directly or indirectly. And because the US and Israel felt threatened by Iran's potential nuclear program, they're now getting directly involved. Now, you may argue that you don't agree with what the US and Israel are doing, or you do agree with them. I completely respect your guys' opinions. You guys can say whatever you want, but this is not a politics channel. I'm not going to try to go into every single detail. I'm not trying to talk about everything. I just want to be very, very unbiased about this, and there's a reason I go over everything. So, with the attacks that just happened as the US felt threatened by the nuclear program, according to reports, now there's been a lot of talk about how the US is bracing for a potential retaliation move by Iran. So, right now, the US is bracing for Iran's response after the overnight strikes. So, like I said before, it's very sad for everyday people and civilians that are involved in this. It's also very sad to see the world having to go through this. But I just want to say, what is the effect of this, right? Innocent people will lose their lives. It's very sad. But at the same time, it's going to be affecting a lot of our lives. It's going to be affecting millions, if not billions, of people's lives because of the effect it has on energy, inflation, and a bunch of other things. So, from a financial standpoint, keep in mind that this will have big effects because the US has launched about 14 GBU 57s. There are 30,000 bunker buster bombs that kind of go deep into the ground when they explode. But the problem is now that Iran is not happy about this. Are they going to strike us back? Is there going to be a big back and forth between the US and Iran now? Because President Trump is now saying that any retaliation by Iran against the US will be met with force far greater than what we witnessed tonight. So, my point is, you have Iran threatening the US is threatening Iran. And I understand all the theories about us wanting a regime change, whatever it is, oil that's involved, the list goes on. But my point is, it's very, very intense. And with these tensions rising, we're now seeing oil prices going up quite a bit. Oil prices are beginning to soar. So if you look at this down here, you'll see that the Brent crude is actually up 20% over the past months to about $79.04. And it could be climbing towards $130 per barrel, according to JP Morgan. So that's massive news as oil prices are now starting to go up. 48% of the oil reserves that are used right now that are known come from the Middle East, and Iran is directly involved in providing oil for a lot of big countries. So, of course, it's going to have a big effect on us, and simultaneously the entire Middle East, which affects the US's oil prices. Right now, crude futures are going up like this. You guys can see crude futures are beginning to climb to 67.75, if not into the 70s very soon. And as you guys could tell, when you look at the blue line, that's CPI. So CPI inflation does tend to follow crude, right? They tend to have a very, very high correlation. So that's very, very intense, right? And this could also be affecting the Fed's job. When you look at the Fed and what's going on with them, let me fix that. Sorry about that. What's happening is Jerome Powell was warning us that there's going to be a risk of higher inflation during the summertime. And as of right now, it looks like we have a potential catalyst that could be causing that, especially if we start to see inflation going up because of energy prices. So this may incentivize the Fed to keep rates higher for longer, and this is not the best of news for the markets. Also, Jerome Powell did warn us about the effect this could have on unemployment, as we're starting to see a slowing in the job openings markets. So keep that in mind. Now, what happens to the stock market? Well, in the beginning, when we enter wars in the US, if there's a very, very intense situation, the very beginning could be very, very nuanced. You have instances where the market sells off, other instances where the market holds up because of external factors. But if you account for crude oil, if you account for the war news, crude oil, inflation, all those other things, there is a risk of that downside move. Now, despite that, the long term after these wars does tend to be bullish. 6 months later and 12 months later, most of the time the market is bullish after wars because more liquidity gets injected into the markets. But the short term could be very, very nuanced. There could be upside, there could be downsides. So you want to be very careful based on what we see historically. Now, tomorrow is going to be Monday, June 23rd. It's after Tesla's Robotaxi launches simultaneously at 9:45. We have the S&P Global Composite Manufacturing and Services PMI reports, which may cause some volatility. We also have Bowman giving a speech from the Fed, so keep that in mind. Finally, the fear and greed index is currently at neutral. It's not too fearful, not too greedy. It's in the middle. We're going to see if this shifts. Will there be more fear that causes momentum to slow down as we see the S&P 500 get closer to the 125 daily moving average? Are we going to see the put to call option ratio climb higher as we see more puts being bought? And is the VIX going to be making a big change? We'll have to see about that. So, with that being said, guys, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up about all of this. What do I see at least for the future? Now I just want to focus more on Tesla. So, like I said before, if we're bullish on Tesla, just hypothetically, let's just say that the Robotaxi event is a big success and it trumps all of this news, then it's possible Tesla tries to break 333 and starts breaking out a lot higher, right, for a 340 plus. Now, if we're bearish, if we get a bad reaction, let's just say the Robotaxi is not enough to really help Tesla launch. You want to see Tesla fail at 320, then retest 313 to 310. If that fails us, there's going to be a risk of us dumping to the low 300s, so keep that in mind. There is that risk of downside looking at the current trend. So my guts tells me that we're just going to get tight like this, but I do want to say that with the whole situation, that there's a 50-50 chance of Tesla going up or down just solely based off the Robotaxi event. And then with Bitcoin selling off right now, there's a higher probability of the market coming down as a whole, which could also slow Tesla down. So I would argue that the odds favor consolidation and then maybe some downside for Tesla. It's a little bit more probable. I hope that makes sense. So like there's a 50-50 chance of upside or downside based off Robotaxi itself. But then with the news involving these strikes against Iran and with oil going up, if the whole market starts dragging down, that also affects Tesla. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at Tesla on the 5-minute time frame, so if you look at Tesla like this, look at the effect the market had on Tesla. For example, Tesla gapped up, it tried to push, then it got this big dump, very similar to SPY on the 5-minute. It pushed and got a big dump, very similar to the QQQ, which pushed and then got a big dump. You guys can see there's a big connection between Tesla and the overall market. So if the whole market starts to dip as a result of this Iran news, of course, guys, that could be affecting Tesla. And that's why I want to give you guys a warning about that. So I hope that makes sense. Bitcoin is selling off more right now. That's not the best of signs. So I think the odds favor that, we might see consolidation and maybe some downside on Tesla. We might be retesting 310. If it doesn't hold, we could be dipping more. Unless we end up reclaiming 333 to be bullish if the Robotaxi event really trumps everything. Yes, watch your levels just to be safe, but I just want to say the risk is to the downside given the situation and how the market is starting to show signs of selling off, how it may drag Tesla a bit lower. So please keep that in mind. Even on Friday, we got a rejection. The daily and weekly look kind of weak on Tesla. So we are favoring the 310s or below on Tesla, at least for now. So please be very careful. Of course, the Robotaxi is very bullish for the long term, but for the short term, you could get nuances just like that. Like I said before, with the S&P 500 or SPY, we're going to start off with this one. As you could tell, if we're bullish, you want to hold 595. If that holds, we're looking for 598 to 600. If we're bearish, you want to see this basically dump and start losing 592.5. If that fails, I see 585 or below coming. So keep those levels in mind. As of right now, SPY is bouncing near 592 to 595, and we're rejecting near the low 600s. So it's going back and forth, but the odds favor basically us potentially continuing to fall back down to 592.5. If it doesn't hold, we could be dipping all the way down to 585 if we get the more bearish case. So make sure you watch your levels. To be bullish, like I said before, you need to get back above 598 to start pushing back up like this. And to be bearish, you want to see us fail at 592.5 to dump to 585. My guts tells me that when you look at the daily time frame, and you look at the weekly, we look kind of weak here. We're barely holding our 20 EMA at 593.68. So the odds favor the downwards direction. So looking at the 4-hour time frame, I think the odds favor downside. I do think that we're going to have to see how this ends up going. But you want to be very, very patient, at least nonetheless. So we could gap down and start dumping to 592.5. If that fails us, we could be dumping all the way down to 585. And I also want to add that we have a potential left shoulder here, a head, and a right shoulder on SPY, which could also favor downside. Also notice that on Friday we got a rejection, and it's been like this, right? Rejection, 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 which also favors downside. So that's why I do think the risk is more to the downside, as we're seeing, a lot of tickers showing weakness. So we are favoring 592.5, if not 585, if we end up continuing to fall. So keep that in mind. With the QQQ, this looks even weaker because the weekly is weak. The weekly looks kind of weak right here on the weekly time frame. We could be favoring at least, I'd say, like the low 520s. On the daily, we look kind of weak here. We're going to be favoring 524. If it doesn't hold, we're going to be dumping back down to 515. And then the 4-hour is also looking kind of weak. So when you look at the 4-hour time frame on the QQQ, you have a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder. And we also got another rejection on Friday, which is not the best of signs. Now, If we get back above at least 530, we could try some kind of bounce move. It's always a possibility. And if we end up failing at 524, I think the odds are favoring us coming down to 520, then eventually this like 515 area. My gut tells me with this head and shoulders, we have some weakness. So we could consolidate and start dipping back down to the low 520s, if not 515. So keep that in mind as the downside risk is there. On the IWM, we have a left shoulder, we have a head, then we have a right shoulder. Now, if we break 212, we could try to break out higher, but if we don't do that, we're going to be at risk of dipping back down to 205 and eventually the low 200s off a head and shoulders. So we're favoring downside to 205 or below on the IWM if that ends up panning out. If we hold above 212, we could try a bounce, but it's not looking as probable as we got a rejection on Friday. And because of this war news with the risk of crude going up, that could drag this market lower, taking us down to like 205 or below. ES is going to open. We're going to see what it trades like very soon, but I just want to say that we're looking a little bit weak here. Like I said, left shoulder, head, right shoulder. And then with the market potentially selling off, that could also drag Tesla lower. Now, if we want to be bullish, you want to see it reclaim 6,080 and 6,100. If you're bearish, you want to see us fail around that 59.80 area to dump to 59.50. If 59.50 fails us, we're looking for a dump, so keep that in mind as well. As of right now, we're favoring downside for 59.50, so keep that in mind. The odds favor downside to the lower 5900s. On NQ, we have a left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder. And then we got another rejection right here. We need to get back above 22,000 to bounce. If not, there's going to be a risk of us dipping back down to 21,500. So I think the odds are favoring the downwards direction. Left shoulder, head, and right shoulder. And we're making lower highs, which could be favoring the lower 21,500s. Now, can we get back above 22,000 to bounce? It's a possibility, but it looks less probable. And as of right now, with what we're seeing, we are looking a bit weaker. So I think 21,500 is very possible. Guys, Bitcoin is dumping right now. So that's another indicator that the market is going to see some downside. Double top structure. And then also we could be dipping to like 97,000 or below. It's been dumping pretty hard. It's down 3%, it's continuing to fall. That could be bearish. Not the best of signs for Tesla with Bitcoin selling off and potentially the markets. So that could also lead to downside. The market could drag Tesla lower, but we're going to see if the Robo taxi can help save Tesla. If not, the odds favor downside for 310. And if that fails us, we could be dipping more. I hope Tesla gets back above 333 to balance, but it's not looking as probable. I think the more likely possibility is downside. But we'll see just to be safe. So watch what happens tomorrow. On Nvidia, we need to get back above 145 to bounce. If we can't do that, we're looking for that gap fill for 142, then eventually back down towards like 138. We're favoring downside for the low 140s. Apple looks a bit more bullish, but it depends on if we could hold above this trend line. If we reject off 202, we turn back down to 195. But if we break that, we're looking for essentially 204. So keep that in mind as there is some downside risk. For Netflix, there's a slanted head and shoulders. We need to get back above 1250 to bounce. If we can't, we're looking for the low 1200s. If that fails us, we could be dipping more. For MSTR, we have a head and shoulders here. We need to get back above 378. If we can't, we're going to be at risk of dipping to like the 350s. Celsius is kind of weak here. We got to hold above 44. If we can't, I see 41.9 coming and eventually back down to 40.9. For Supermicro, we like to reject near 46. We did touch that. I want to see it get back above 46. That's going to be a very, very big ceiling. If we can't reclaim that, the odds are going to favor 44 or below. Palantir is kind of weak here. We need to hold above 135. If not, we have a head and shoulders. I think 135 is going to be tested and back down towards 132. Rivian's kind of weak here. We're making lower highs. We need to get back above 13.7. If not, we could be dipping to 13.3. SoFi might be retesting 14.8. We need to hold above this. There's a triple bearish divergence. So it's favoring 14.8. We're going to see if that holds or not. AMD is looking weak here. I think we're going to be testing 125 to 122 for a little bit of downside, and we'll see if we bounce. ARM is going to be testing 143.28. It needs to hold. If not, we're looking for 139. PayPal is going to likely retest 70.8. We're going to see if it rejects there. If we hold above the 70.8 area, we could bounce. If not, we could touch that, then reject back down to like 68. So keep that in mind. Coinbase pushed very nicely, but with Bitcoin dipping, it might not hold up as well. We need to hold above 310. If not, we could be dipping back down to like the 290s. So be very careful. Amazon has a double top here. We need to get back above at least 212. If we can't do that, we have to hold at like 208. If not, we could be dumping towards like 205. So please be very careful. Meta has a double top here. We need to get back above 692. If not, we could be dipping back down towards 675. Google has a double top here, kind of rejecting. Needs to get back above 169. If not, we could be dipping back down to 165. And then Microsoft needs to hold above 477. If not, we could be dipping back down to 474 or below. DJT is on a downtrend. We might be dipping back down towards this 17.5 area. The VIX is consolidating. We have a nice accumulation here off a double bottom. This could be favoring a bounce. If we hold above like 21.08, we're near that. This could start breaking out for like 26 or above. That could be some downside risk for the markets. The 10 years flat is going to be dependent on FOMC and what happens with the Fed in the upcoming months. And then my concern for the markets is the dollar index. It also has an inverse head and shoulders, a left shoulder, head, and then right shoulder. So the inverse is like bullish. That's typically a bearish sign for the markets. So right now, with the market kind of reacting like this, we're going to see what happens to futures in case we do get some kind of negative reaction. That could be a bit more negative for Tesla. Watch your levels just to be safe. If we break 333, we're more bullish. If we lose 310, we're more bearish. We've been stuck between those levels for many weeks, but there's going to be a risk of downside on Tesla given the fact that the market is kind of reacting like this. And it might not, the robotaxi might not be enough to get this thing to really bounce, because we oftentimes hear about buy the rumors, sell the news, right? So honestly, guys, be careful at Tesla. Anything could happen, but the odds do favor downside looking at what's going on right now. So I want to give you guys a heads up about that. Anyways, we'll watch and see how things end up going. We're going to be very patient and keep your guys' heads together. Be very, very calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow before market open. Thank you for listening. Have a good one, and peace out.